Hello and welcome to the World War II Total War channel. Pay close attention because today we are going to see and hear a very little known anecdote of the Second World War, one of those totally unfortunate episodes that are not widely shared since they show the worst parts of a conflict. If wars are already not horrible enough and it is hard having to fight against people from another country, there is something worse still, and that is ending the lives of soldiers from your own side by mistake. This is exactly what we are going to see in this video, which also has nothing more and nothing less than George Patton himself as the protagonist. We are referring specifically to a friendly fire incident. It occurred on the 11th of July 1943 in the middle of the Allied invasion of Sicily, which involved the downing of 23 planes and counted 550 casualties amongst the dead and wounded. But first, let's put it into context. We are at the end of 1942, shortly after the final defeat of the Italian-German army at El Alamein. The Germans are beginning their retreat towards Tunisia, without the possibility of establishing effective defences along the Libyan coast, as the Americans have also landed on the coast of Morocco and threatened to leave them completely surrounded. After a final victory against the Americans by the Germans at the Kasserine Pass, they went on the defensive around Tunis until their final surrender in May 1943, in which they captured 130,000 Italian-German soldiers. While this is taking place in the Mediterranean, the Germans in Russia are preparing their third major summer offensive, which was precisely cut short at the end by the episode that we are going to analyse today. On July the 9th, exactly 4 days after the start of the Citadel operation, the Allies began the invasion of Sicily, an act that will ultimately result in the removal and imprisonment of Mussolini by the King of Italy. The Allied plan involved the landing of two armies, one in southern and one in southeastern Sicily, which both were integrated into the 15th Army Group under Marshal Harold Alexander. The first army was to take Syracuse and then rush to Messina, surrounding Mount Etna, with the aim of cutting off enemy escape into the Strait of Messina. The second army would advance west and then return to trap the enemy forces between the two armies. The two Allied armies selected were the US 7th Army and the British 8th Army, led by Generals George Patton and Bernard Montgomery. Patton's 7th Army was to land between Licata and Gela, whilst Montgomery's 8th Army would land in the province of Syracuse. Both armies would launch airborne forces that would make scattered landings. Each army had 2 corps under its command, with a total of 11 divisions, including reserve ones, which were stationed in Africa. On July the 10th, 1943, both armies made their landings. The night before, airborne forces had been dropped onto the island, but the unusually strong forces caused them to be dispersed and even caused many airplanes to crash into the water. After the first combat against the German forces, and before little success of the paratrooper launches, on the 11th of July, Patton again requested that parachute reinforcements be sent from North Africa to strengthen his lines and repel the Italian-German counter-attacks. It is here when this tragedy occurred for the North American side, which could have been avoided were it not for the negligence of the commanders. The request was heard, and 144 transport planes with 2,000 paratroopers took off from Tunisia. The flights proceeded normally until the aircraft began to pass low over the US invasion fleet at an altitude of 250 metres, which at that time were anchored off the coast of Sicily. Surprisingly, no one had warned the ships about the presence of the planes that were flying overhead, and they mistakenly believed that they were enemy aircraft. Suddenly, the entire fleet opened fire with hundreds of anti-aircraft guns and batteries against their own aircraft. Dumbfounded, the pilots of the planes tried to manoeuvre between the artillery fire But it was futile, as a good number of aircraft were hit and fell burning into the sea with their entire crews on board. A total of 23 C-47 Dakota planes were shot down by friendly fire, with a staggering 547 casualties, including 164 killed and 383 wounded. As if that were not enough, the rest of the planes were dispersed by the naval flashes, and only 400 paratroopers landed on their objective, located between Gela and Farello. And since misfortunes never come alone, the British seem to have wanted to imitate their American colleagues and carried out a similar action. 2 days later, on July the 13th, before the Battle of Catania began, another 126 planes with paratroopers took off from North Africa to take a series of bridges in the surroundings of Lentini, thus restricting access to the Germans. Yet again, as the planes passed over the fleet, which just hours earlier had received a German air raid, the sailors began firing at their own aircraft. The error ended with the downing of 14 planes. As if that were not enough, another 19 aircraft returned to their bases without launching the paratroopers, and another 27 lost their orientation, dispersed by the projectiles. So, 39 planes of the nearly 130 released their paratroopers between 2 and 3 kilometers from the bridges, which meant a total failure of the mission. The number of casualties suffered by the British in this operation is unknown, but they can be placed between 300 and 350. In addition, we must add to the deaths in combat of those 39 aircraft that managed to launch themselves on these brigades, and that being so inferior in numbers, they were defeated by the Germans and Italians more easily than if the entire British contingent had fallen. Regardless of this, the Allied conquest of Sicily continued with its plan, and little by little it was cornering the German troops in the surroundings of the Messina Pass, until, finally, on August the 17th, Patton entered Messina, winning his private career battle with Montgomery, who came from the south and arrived 1 day later. Unfortunately for them, when they reached Messina, all the Italian and German soldiers withdrew to the Italian peninsula through the Messina Pass without being captured. It is estimated that approximately 100,000 passed to Italy with most of their material, and this was one of the forces that would move to settle on the Gustav line that resisted until May 1944. But all these incidents of friendly fire did not go unpunished, and after the end of the campaign, Patton was accused of the serious error, since he was the head and supreme commander of the US forces and was temporarily relieved of his position. Paradoxically, his prolonged stay in Sicily was interpreted by the Germans as indicative of an immediate invasion of southern France, and subsequently his stay in Cairo was interpreted as the signal of a future invasion through the Balkans. The fear of General Patton helped keep many German troops occupied, and would be a very important factor in the following months, thanks to the fact that he was used as a decoy by the Allies, being the last of them in the Pass de Calais. Well, this is the story that we wanted to bring today, and it is that they are episodes in history that, although they are not censored, they try not to comment much because they take away the honour of the combatants, so to speak. In fact, to this day, when a soldier dies by friendly fire in a war, or in a supposed peace mission as they are called now, the family or the media are not usually informed of this, and they make up with what they have done. It was the enemy who did it. And finally, I hope this video has helped you to know one more episode of this conflict. Tell us what you think, and if you see it logical and normal for this kind of thing to be done. Subscribe if you haven't already, and see you in the next video.